Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into an absolutely monumental paradox. We are looking back at the era of the Spanish Empire to uncover exactly how an insatiable quest for gold, a quest that annihilated the great civilizations of the Americas, actually became an ironic curse that brought the mighty Spanish Empire itself to its knees.
Now, this presents a really fascinating historical mystery. I mean, you'd logically think that finding practically limitless mountains of precious metal would secure a nation's dominance forever, right? Yet, the Spanish Empire, which stretched all the way from Mexico to Peru and across the Pacific, somehow found itself literally drowning in its own wealth. It's a massive economic puzzle that proves bringing home the treasure absolutely doesn't guarantee you'll keep the power. To get our heads around this, we really need to understand the sheer scale of extraction. Over 100 tons of gold were shipped to Spain by 1560 alone. Let that sink in for a second. Within just the first half-century of the Spanish arrival in the Americas, they effectively doubled the entire gold supply of Europe. Ships were crossing the Atlantic loaded with unimaginable fortunes. But to understand why this shocked the global system so violently, we have to look at what they were actually searching for and why.
All right, let's kick things off with Part 1, Gold Fever and Spanish Ambitions.
So, at the very heart of this era was a deeply tragic clash of values. For indigenous civilizations like the Inca and Aztec, gold just wasn't currency. They actually valued materials like jade, turquoise, or finely woven textiles much more for everyday trade. Gold was revered for its luster and incorruptibility. They saw it as the sweat of the sun god and used it to craft objects of profound religious significance. But for the Spanish, gold was hard cash. It was the absolute, non-negotiable necessity for training soldiers, paying mercenaries, and buying gunpowder to expand their empire back in the Old World.
To really grasp the Spanish desperation and their total shock at the wealth of the Americas, consider this. Before Columbus, all the gold in Europe combined amounted to a mere 88 tons. If you gathered every single ounce of gold across the entire European continent from east to west, it would fit into one single cube measuring just 6 feet on each side. So when the Conquistadors arrived and saw ordinary people wearing gold as everyday adornment and temples literally covered in the stuff, it ignited a totally feverish obsession.
Which brings us to Part 2, Annihilation of Civilizations for Wealth.
And here is the incredibly dark reality behind all that wealth. This is the famous Potosí mine, discovered in 1545. While they were busy searching for gold, the Spanish stumbled upon staggering amounts of silver. Potosí ended up producing 80% of all Peruvian silver, but it came at a horrific human cost, earning the chilling nickname, the mountain that eats men. The Spanish used forced labor systems, like the encomienda, effectively enslaving local populations. It's estimated that as many as 8 million indigenous and African enslaved laborers died working in these insanely treacherous, deep underground mines over the centuries.
There's this incredibly haunting quote from a contemporary viceroy of Peru that really underscores the brutal reality of the colonial extraction machine. You see, the deaths weren't just from cave-ins or physical exhaustion. The refining process itself was incredibly toxic. To separate the silver and gold from the ore, laborers were forced to use a mercury amalgamation process. That meant handling highly toxic mercury, or azogue, with absolutely zero protection. Entire communities were just decimated by mercury poisoning alone.
Let's move into Part 3, Melting History and Erasing Identity. What happened next was just a cold, mechanical, three-step process that systematically transformed priceless history into generic metal bars. The Conquistadors didn't care at all about the artistic brilliance or the religious significance of an Aztec golden crab necklace or an Inca sun mask. They just cared about the weight. To maximize space on the galleons sailing back to Europe, they relentlessly tossed intricately crafted statues, jewelry, and sacred items straight into the melting pots, turning them into standardized ingots and coins.
Nothing captures the sheer scale of this cultural destruction quite like the tragic story of the Inca emperor Atahualpa's ransom room. In 1532, Atahualpa was captured by Francisco Pizarro. To buy his freedom, he offered to fill a 17 by 22-foot room with gold, all the way up to his outstretched arm. Thousands of exquisite, sacred objects were hauled from across the empire to fill this space. But despite paying this astronomical ransom, Atahualpa was executed anyway, and every single one of those priceless cultural artifacts completely melted down.
If there is one thing you take away from this explainer, let it be the sheer tragedy of what was lost. Down in Cusco, the Inca had a temple garden dedicated to the sun god, Inti.
It was filled with life-size golden llamas, golden jaguars, golden birds, and even fields of golden corn. Today, out of that entire magnificent garden, only one single golden wheat stalk exists. The rapacious destruction of material objects literally obliterated the physical record of entire ancient cultures.
Moving right along to Part 4, the Black Legend and Historical Debate. So as you might guess, word of these atrocities definitely did not stay hidden in the Americas. In fact, Spain's European rivals weaponized these accounts for their own geopolitical gain, creating what's known as the Black Legend. As the printing press really took off in Europe, rival Protestant powers, like the English and the Dutch, who were fighting their own wars against the Catholic Spanish Empire, started churning out pamphlets. They highlighted and sometimes exaggerated Spanish cruelties, portraying them as uniquely evil compared to other colonial powers.
And the real irony here? The fuel for this Protestant propaganda actually came from within Spain itself. Take this famous quote from Bartolomé de las Casas, a Spanish Dominican friar. He wrote a harrowing, very real account of the abuses to petition the King of Spain to protect the indigenous people, and it actually worked, resulting in the new laws of 1542 abolishing native slavery. But his writings were quickly translated and co-opted by the Dutch and English to paint the entire Spanish nation with a brush of fanaticism. It's a historical narrative that scholars argue still colors the perception of Hispanic history today.
Which brings us to our final act, Part 5, the Curse of Inflation and Imperial Fall.
Okay, so what happens when you suddenly dump 100 tons of gold and countless tons of silver into a European economy that previously only had 88 tons of gold in total? Well, you completely shatter the supply and demand curve. This triggered a catastrophic economic event known as the price revolution. The sudden oversupply of money meant the currency just lost its value. We're talking about a shocking 400% hyperinflation across Europe over the 16th century. Prices skyrocketed simply because there was suddenly way too much money chasing way too few actual goods.
And this led to a complete economic collapse for Spain. Because there was so much gold floating around domestically, local wages rose. That meant products made in Spain became incredibly expensive to produce, making their exports completely uncompetitive compared to French or English goods. At the same time, the Spanish crown felt totally invincible, so they borrowed astronomical sums from international bankers to fund endless global wars, confidently promising to pay everyone back with the next treasure fleet from the Americas.
All of this culminated in the ultimate humiliation. King Philip II of Spain, the absolute ruler of the wealthiest empire on earth, the empire that controlled the endless mines of Potosí and the looted treasures of the Aztec and Inca, actually defaulted on his national debt. And not just once, he defaulted 4 separate times during his reign, in 1557, 1560, 1575, and 1596. The gold was coming in by the galleon, sure, but it was flowing right back out just as fast to pay for foreign goods and foreign wars.
It's honestly a stark picture of poetic justice, isn't it? An empire completely drowning in the very wealth it sacrificed millions of lives to violently obtain. The vast influx of gold didn't build a sustainable economy at all. It just masked fundamental weaknesses and encouraged totally reckless spending. By the time the 17th century rolled around, the Spanish Empire was losing its grip on global dominance, eventually eclipsed by the emerging British and Dutch empires.
So, if limitless wealth only leads to self-destruction, what is the true cost of building an empire? I'll leave you with that final thought to ponder about the ultimate, tragic irony of the Spanish conquest. They destroyed irreplaceable cultures, committed unspeakable atrocities, and literally melted down history itself, all for a medal that ultimately bankrupted them. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the true value of what we consider wealth.